Well, nothing quickens the pulse of weather-wise Pennsylvanians more than thinking about what the next winter might be like. Cold and snowy, like snowflake contest people are interested in, or could it be mild and dry? Around here at Weather World, there's only one person we can think of who we can go to for the answers, joining us from an undisclosed location. Yes, it's Paul Knight in the bunker, Paul, and we're all waiting for all the answers.
Well, hola, Fred. It's good to be back. Nice to see you again. And the answers, well, we'll see what we can say by, first of all, taking a look back at what last winter was like. And this is the temperature pattern across the northeastern U.S., departure from normal from December 1st through the end of February. And it was warm. In fact, in Pennsylvania, it was the fourth warmest winter of record, those 3 months. Precipitation-wise, you may not remember this, but it was actually relatively moist. There were a few pockets of dry in the far west, but very moist in the east and the south, and it was the 25th wettest winter of record, too. Now, just to remind you of the specifics of what happened last year, because I can't remember them either, but generally it was warm. It was very warm in December. In fact, December really set the trend for the entire winter. It was all-time warmth right around Christmas Eve. Temperatures averaged 12 degrees above normal for the month. It was the biggest storm of the winter was the blizzard on the 22nd and 24th. Along the East Coast. Allentown, you might remember, had 31.9 inches. Harrisburg had a little over 30 inches. That was a season's worth of snow in one storm. The coldest snap of the winter was Valentine's Day weekend with minimums near zero. And there were those rare tornadoes in February on the 24th. There were 2 tornadoes, even in EF2 in Lancaster County. So what's coming up this time around? Well, unlike last year when we looked at 3 gorillas, this year it's a zoo, so we're going to be looking at a mongoose and probably a bit of a skunk, and if we had a polar bear, that would be on there as well. And this is what we're discussing. We're looking at the global sea surface temperature anomalies, so the cool areas, the blues are cold areas, the oranges and reds are warm areas, as of the very beginning of November. And there's still this warm pool in the North Pacific, which we'll talk about. That's sometimes called the Pacific Decadal Oscillation positive phase. The tropical Pacific, the ENSO is essentially over, so no more El Nino. Now we're into a weak La Nina, really essentially neutral. The snow cover in the northern part of Eurasia has increased at a tremendous rate during the month of October. And then there's also this other big change that occurred in the Indian Ocean. That is, it went from being exceptionally warm in April to kind of chilly as we get into the early part of the autumn here, and that is a player that we don't oftentimes talk about.
You know, Paul, you're right, but folks probably are getting used to people talking about El Nino and La Nina on the seasonal forecast, but this Indian Ocean thing, I mean, is it really important to our weather, or when is it important?
Well, Fred, most of the time it is not important because it usually just affects the southern hemisphere, so East Africa, Australia, India, and the Indonesia region. But because the Pacific has turned neutral, that is that the ENSO is neither plus nor minus, and the change was rather dramatic in the Indian Ocean, which is essentially very much like the sloshing that occurs in the Pacific, the Indian Ocean dipole as it's called. But now that it's so dramatic this year, it becomes a potential player. And in fact, we'll take a look at the likely scenarios. Well, first of all, let's talk about the North Pacific. And in the North Pacific case, if this were to be the dominant signal, that is the, so to speak, the skunk in the North Pacific, because it's there again this year, it was there last winter too, but the warm water in the North Pacific, if that's the dominant signal, then the December through February temperatures favor cool across the eastern 2/3 of North America, and cool here in Pennsylvania. This looks a lot like, by the way, what a El Nino would look like too. However, if indeed the Indian Ocean becomes the dominant signal, that is its sudden change that occurred between April and October of this year, then this looks a lot more like a typical La Nina, which is warm in the south and cool across the north. So this would be mild in Pennsylvania. However, if indeed the Eurasian snow cover, which increased at a record rate during the month of October across Siberia, most of Asian Russia, and Mongolia, well, look at the signal here. This is definitely a cold signal. So we really have 2 that are favoring toward the cooler side and only 1 that favors a mild period. However, I think this is the general pattern. We're already seeing, to some degree, this pattern showing up in the early part of November. So it'll be a wet, cool time in the Pacific Northwest and mild and moist in the upper plains. But it looks like there'll be a ridge in the mid-continent it'll favor dry and warm conditions, and that droughty area in the southeast may migrate into the southern plains. So we'll get opportunities to have chilly air come in here, but also dry east of the mountains and perhaps snowy at times, especially to the north and east. So to summarize it, Fred, December looks noticeably cooler than last year. That's an easy signal, and above average snowfall. That would be different. January, I think, is the month that could have some memorable Arctic outbreaks, but a big thaw as well, but dry east of the mountains. And February starts cold, but then I think it turns mild. And of course, at this time of the year, Fred, mild generally means that also there could be some messy storms around as well.
You know, that is an impressive amount of detail. I think that is worth every penny we are paying you for this visit.
And there's no refunds on this one, Fred.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul, once again. And we'll see how that all comes out in a few months. And we will be back in a moment with more.